to the Fantasy Pavilion, your home for fantasy sports.
You're like a circle that floats around me.
Team here, you all in the comments. Let me know what you all think. Poke some holes, right? Losh, guys, he's much. Guys, thanks for watching. Losh. All right, time to go. Please tell the people the team that you back to.
Well, I can show you. That one right there.
I'm gonna edit that out in post, right?
Welcome to the Fantasy Pavilion. We go live in 10. Number 9.
8. Yo! 7.
Number 6.
5. Entry. Welcome, guys. Welcome back to another episode of FPL Convos, where we have a nice, chill, relaxed conversation about the favorite game that gives us a lot of stress and happiness all in one. Of course, speaking of stress, on this episode, we're talking about mental health and sport, not just about FPL, but about the fans, the coaches, and the players, and what they feel on a day-to-day basis. And I am joined by a well-informed, awesome guest that is going to help us run through this particular topic. So my guest is a qualified sport and exercise psychologist, the director of MENTALLTY Trinidad, and a columnist at the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday, and also works at the Elite Athlete Wellbeing Unit of the Sports Company of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, she's primarily works with athletic sporting populations and varying ages and competitive levels. Recently, I know she would have been attached to the national rugby team. Of course, also elite Olympic athletes and officials. I am joined by none other than Alexandria Olton. Alexandria, thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you very much for having me today, Doug.
All right. So, of course, I would have broken down a few things about you there, but let the people know a little more about you. And, of course, what exactly is a sport and exercise psychologist? What does that mean?
I wish I had $1 for every time somebody asks that question. So thank you for the introduction. So feel free
I will put it in the tip jar, right? I'll put it in the tip jar.
I love how handy that $1 was.
I was right.
So I am a sports and exercise psychologist. In a nutshell, I sort of take care of the mental well-being and the mental performance of athletes. So just like they will go into a gym and have a strength and conditioning coach do a program for them for their physical well-being, and they'll go out on the field and work with their technical coaches, they come to me and we develop psychological programs that they can kind of follow, and I would sort of engage with them in sessions and stuff to better their mental performance. And that doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong with athletes that come to see me, because actually more often than not, it's top performing athletes who want to get that mental edge that often come and, seek sports psychological services. But of course, we do have athletes who are recovering from injury, they're returning to play, they have fear of re-injury. You have athletes that are dealing with transitions from clubs, transition from playing to retirement, all these kinds of things. So it's a plethora of situations we can find ourselves dealing with athletes, but largely that's kind of it.
Yeah, okay, I like that. So basically you work the mental muscle.
That's right.
You get, and the mental
I am the
conditioning.
brain trainer.
I like that. All right, so and also what you up to these days? What you doing these days right now? What you recently, especially with COVID and going on, what you up to these days? How are you keeping up?
We still have a lot of national athletes that are working. Obviously, I can't reveal who my athletes are, but out in the public's eye, it's known that I work with the senior women's national football team. So they're on their campaign for qualification for CONCACAF, and then ultimately for FIFA Women's World Cup. So that's certainly something that's been keeping me quite busy. Very, very, very exciting to work in a team dynamic. You know, individual athletes are great, but a team dynamic is super challenging because you take one individual athlete and you multiply them and then try to get them to work together. So it's an amazing experience. I've also been you know, in the light with rugby a little bit, but I was appointed as a national coach for the 15s program, which has currently kind of been placed on hold, and the 7th program is actually where the focus is right now. But I also coach a local club as well, and so I'm hoping that with the reopening of sport that has recently been announced, that, you know, we'll see a lot more athletes out and about and back in the savannah and stuff like that. And yeah, generally that's it. Otherwise, you'll see little pockets of information coming from me every other week in the news day, and that's about it. Making TikToks.
Yes, you're also editing in TikToks. I should have queued up some, you know. I will see what I can do. Right?
No,
it's not too hard. Right? Of course, guys, you can find her at MENTALLTY on Instagram, right? I will plug it in down below, right? So you can go, and not just, of course, the TikToks, but some good information as well. She does put some nice tidbits on. I did run through it this week, so I can be well prepared for today. Okay, so now you brought up something there that I want to talk about. So instead, from individual athletes to now working with a team. So, and of course, football, cricket, all these things are team sport. All of us are fans. We put these players under a lot of pressure.
Yep.
How do you forget? Okay, let's forget the fans for a while. Okay.
Yep,
so
sure.
let's look at the players. Right, let's focus on the players. How do you prep? What's the average routine for prepping a team for a big match, a derby game, or something that's, let's say, a big qualifier where a lot of pressure is on the line? They were the first few games, let's say it's 10 games, this is the last game, and it's all on the line. Right. What's the average routine, if there's such a thing as the average routine?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't really a one-size-fits-all, unfortunately. That would make my job a lot easier because I'll just stamp and paste on. But, you know, every team is different, and every group of athletes vary from what they need, you know, and every environment is different, and that comes from everything from the coaching staff and technical staff and what they foster and facilitate, to the age of the athletes, to the gender of the athletes, to you know, where the athletes come from and the sport that they play and so on, because of course you have sort of concentrated areas of sport where you find athletes coming from more marginalized backgrounds versus athletes who come from more privileged backgrounds. So it is a very unique situation that we find ourselves in Trinidad with our you know, teams and team sports. I think the first thing that I probably need to identify is that oftentimes it can be some, you know, a bit of a last minute scramble. You're given 3 months to prep a team and you say, go, you know, and it's better to have a team from its inception, really, and get that mental routine going with them and be able to develop, in an ideal world, have that time to develop the mental skills with the athletes. So actually, I have been quite lucky enough to work with women's football from the inception. So from last year, July, when they got together, you know, they introduced sports psychology into the environment right away, which is brilliant. Similarly, I was working with under 21 boys hockey, preparing them for Pan Am juniors, and actually it got postponed, so it gave us a year to work together. So those boys were really mentally equipped for anything, and you know, that really reared itself in that competition, because, you know, the day before we left, 7 of the boys, or I think it was 6 or 7 of the boys, you know, there was issues with their testing, and so we had to leave some of the team behind. And you know, that kind of mental toughness and resilience and ability to bounce from adversity is really, it demonstrated itself. And so from my perspective, those kinds of things are what's important, and obviously everybody wants to see the results as well. So but to prepare a team, you really need the foundations of good mental structures, you know, practices of good self-talk, self-awareness. You need to create that emotional intelligence in athletes, and all athletes come with different levels of emotional intelligence. You know, quite often, I mean, how many times have you met up with your partners and you say, hey, how you going? And everybody goes, yeah, normal. what does normal mean? You know, we don't use emotive language in our day-to-day basis. So to get athletes to understand, well, actually by saying I don't feel well today, or I feel sad today, or I feel frustrated, or actually I feel great, or I'm really neutral, getting that out of them is really important, because that information then helps them understand, okay, well, what do I need to prepare myself for my performance? So creating that emotional intelligence is really kind of a big part of my practice, at least, because obviously each practitioner will be different in what they value out of it. But that and then having them develop routines, performance readiness routines. So and then we do mental plans, basically. So just like you'll have a tactical plan and you sit down and talk strategy with your coaches and how you're going to play and what happens at X, Y, and Z. Same kind of thing we do with mental skills. You know, when this happens, what am I going to do? What is the goal? What do I hope to achieve? And you know, how am I going to get there? And what are some of the obstacles that might get in my way, kind of thing. So kind of just, that's a kind of a brief insight as to what we do, but that's some of the stuff. Yeah.
So would you say that it is, I don't want to use the word easier, but getting a guy to talk and getting a female, right? Your female players or your male players, get which one is easier to open? I know there's a hard, right. Because as a guy, I know exactly what you're talking about when you ask, say, how we doing? Yeah, right. We were never taught about, you know, well, look, you know, things not too well, because we were always, you know, taught and told we have to be macho, we have to be strong. And I'm sure you have to deal with that by 11, right? Times 11. So how do you, what's a simple strategy just to open up, get these guys to open up to you and say, well, hey, I know it takes some time. Yeah. Because as you said, you could only help them as much as they help themselves and open up to you. So what's a simple way, or maybe something I could apply to someone, or you know, in my own circle?
It's certainly difficult. I would say that I have worked with some men's teams that actually they are happy to open up and talk about things, and then I've worked with some female athletes who don't necessarily like to speak. So you know, it really is very much dependent on the player. I won't say that I've necessarily noted that gender difference. I think for me, what I've noticed between men and women's teams is what affects them differs. What affects a men's team and their performance and what distracts them is different from what affects a women's team and what distracts them, and how to get them back into focus and performance focus kind of thing. So from that perspective, perhaps. But the first thing, and I think it's always the most important, is to make people feel comfortable. As a sports psychologist, my role is to make people feel comfortable, but to the point where they feel comfortable enough to express certain concerns or vulnerabilities, and allow them to set their own boundaries. So, you know, I will never ask ridiculously probing questions, or you know, you don't directly ask someone how they're feeling all the time, because sometimes they just don't know what to say. Correct. So in a team environment, creating those environments, especially in sessions where sometimes people shut down because they don't want to talk in front of the group, or they want to conform to what the group is saying and they have a different opinion to it. You know, I also encourage that one-to-one session approach, and come and speak to me on the side, or, you know, and I very much how to put it, like a breakfast table sports psych. So if we're sitting having lunch together in camp, I'll talk to this player and see what's going on, have casual conversations. So you begin to make everybody feel comfortable at different points, and then through routine and practice, and then they come to realize there's an element of trust, and then they begin to, and I work a lot on team culture as well. So it's not just about working on individual performances and trying to put it together, but it's also building that team culture and that team environment, and how do I make these group of athletes like each other and work together and be effective and productive. Because, you know, quite often we end up in groups, and I'm sure it's happened, where you end up in a group of people and you just don't take to someone, and you're just like, I could neither here nor there. But we have to get to that point where we could at least work together, because we're on a team and we're working towards a common goal. So developing things like shared values, you know, what's important to you, what is important to me, and where does that meet? You know, I really you know, I am really important. Respect is really important to me, whereas loyalty is really important to me. Well, where's the mutual boundary there, kind of thing? And kind of, you have to kind of generate and foster that environment. And it comes from the coaches as well, because I can't be the only one touting these kinds of things, right? So the coaching environment, the technical staff, they have to, and I have to get them on board with what I'm doing and understand it enough to help me then, propose that and keeping in line with what the coaches want to achieve, because ultimately coaches can be very sort of protective of their athletes and their teams, and I respect that. So the first kind of conversation I ever have with a coach is try to understand what's their coaching philosophy. Why do you coach? What do you want to get out of this team? And I'm here to help you, not me telling you how to coach, not me telling you what to do, but I'm actually here to support you and get what you want to see out of your athletes in the best way possible. And so that collaboration is really, really important as well. So
now for some reason, mental health is always deemed as taboo, right? Now, how long did it take you to implement yourself into the national, or not what you're doing right now? I'm talking about in the earlies, right?
Yeah.
How did you convince governing bodies, national bodies, any type of sector? How did you convince them, hey, this is needed for the players, for the coaches, right, for the background staff? How did you convince them? Because I know people have a way that, oh no, that means I'm sick. And no, everyone goes through something, and it's always good to talk. It's healthy to talk about it, healthy to attack it, and that way you'll be able to perform in whatever it is you're doing in life.
Yep.
So how difficult, or what was your approach in trying to get these bodies to see, well, all right, it is important to exercise as part of the sport, the athlete, and to get them to the optimum best?
I have to say that I cannot take all the credit for something like that, because there was a foundation on which things could have been built. There were a number of practitioners before me and other practitioners who still, and I have the privilege of working with at the sports company. So what happens is that there is the elite athlete well-being unit is actually a unit that is accessible to all national athletes. And they can access sports psychology, strength and conditioning services, performance analysis and testing, nutrition, all for free, right? Which, as long as you represent Trinidad and Tobago, this is an opportunity. So the establishment of that unit, I want to say 10 years ago, but it might be a little bit longer, has created that foundation and laid that foundation of awareness. It doesn't mean that people haven't forgotten. It doesn't mean that we're still not on the education campaign, because it's still very much, I meet people who have no idea what sports psychology is, and I meet coaches all the time who are like, I have no idea what that means, kind of thing. So, but my colleagues and I, we work very hard on the education side of things and to try and spread that wider message. So we have national coaching workshops and so on that we host, that is a campaign to educate, the coaching and NGP population to understand these are the services available, and actually this is what it looks like. And then, appearing on things like these, working closely with the Psychological Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and simply putting ourselves on platforms in which we can, make the public more aware. Something as stupid as the TikToks that I make, they're my attempts to raise awareness around sports psychology, and actually more and more people are messaging and saying, oh, I didn't even know you did this, or I didn't know that this was part of your kind of your purview, as it were. So I think, in that sense, it's still very much needed. I would say we're maybe 45% there, but we have a long road ahead to go to destigmatize mental health, as you would have mentioned, and then to help, and especially at the grassroots and developmental level, bring that presence of sports psychology. And it's because we also have limited resources. I think there are only 6 or 7 sports psychs in all of Trinidad and Tobago, and I mean the athletic population is far greater than that. So we can only have so many touch points before we need to encourage, young and upcoming sports psychs to take up the mantle as well. So
I'm glad you gave that number. So one of my colleagues, Aaron, he did ask me, so what's the education matriculation of getting to be a sports psychologist from CXC up the road? What's the steps?
I could give you my steps.
Right. I like your
steps. So obviously I did CXC, I did Cape, and then I went into university. I was lucky enough to be able to go to university abroad, but there are excellent programs at the University of the West Indies. I did an undergraduate degree in psychology and sociology. And then I specialized in sport and exercise psychology at the postgraduate level. So I completed my master's in that. I'm not sure there are any programs available locally in sport and exercise psychology at the master's level. But I would say that the minimum requirement, education-wise, is definitely at least a master's in it. And then I would have spent, 2 years being mentored and kind of serving hours, as it were, to accumulate that experience. There are various sort of routes as well via the US and the UK, in which you can get sort of qualifications or accreditation that is recognized more internationally. Of course, with these things come a big charge. So, but to practice sport and exercise psychology in Trinidad, the minimum requirement is just a master's degree. And equivalent experience. So throw yourselves into volunteering. And I mean, I've done a lot of volunteering before I got to the point where you could monetize the service, as it were. And even still, there is a lot of room to continue to grow the industry, because I think the services are very undervalued in how they are financially remunerated. So all those things to consider. It's definitely just the typical academic route to the master's level.
Yeah. Right. Before we move on, so we just have a quick comment here. Another team member here. So, right, so it's healthy to talk about, healthy to talk, but hard to open up because of fear of judgment, which you would have just spoken about. And you said, you would pull aside the players, right? So now it's always easy to talk about. Now, every team, anything is set out to do, you always set out positivity, right? You're going to win. But that's not the case every time, Alexandria, right? Yep. So how do you watch 11, how do you watch 15 disgruntled team members and try to remotivate them to get back on that horse? Because that is what is daily. Not just you, the coaches have to do that. The assistant coach, their parents have to do that. Their partners have to do that. Their friends, right? It's a tough, the whole village, right, has to try now. The country, the fans.
Yes.
Because sometimes fans don't understand that. Some fans, right, they will watch a team, the team loses, and they just hard on it. But sometimes it's how you lose, right? Sometimes you can lose good.
Worst.
No, fans are the worst. We are the worst. I will take that. We are the worst. I am that type of fan. I'm trying to be nice. I can get upset sometimes. I won't lie to you. But sometimes if the way my team loses, if I see fight, if I see that, all right, we made it very hard for the other team to lose, no problem. But going back to the original question, right? So how do you remotivate them time and time again? Let's say there's 3 matches in a group stage table. They lost the opening one, which is the worst one to lose. You always want to win that first one because they go in there. That was the aim. You want to win. How do you remotivate them now to get back, to get 6 points and qualify for the next round? So how is that? I know it's a tricky, but how does that work?
I think the seed is planted, certainly, with the expectations set before that match even happens. There's a difference between being blindly optimistic and being sort of realistic about your likely outcomes. If we're playing a difficult team, but we know that we can be competitive, and actually if we stay consistent with the simple stuff, we have a chance of winning. That's different than saying, we're going to win 3-0. So, I think that expectation, and I think it's important, the conversations that I would have with the athletes before that match takes place. What are the strengths? I do a game called Fair in a Cup, and I get them to identify what are some of their strengths that they're bringing to this match, and then what are some of the weaknesses that they're bringing to this match, because nobody's perfect. We all have strengths and weaknesses, right? So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be technical weaknesses. It could be something with respect to your mental or emotional state and mood, tiredness, appetite, that kind of stuff. And then I ask them to also put their fear in a cup, because not everybody's likes to just say what they're afraid of out loud. So by creating that anonymity, there we go, it gives that essence of comfort, as it were. And we identify the strengths and weaknesses out loud, and then I try to identify or get them to identify, okay, well, whose strength complements your weakness? And so it demonstrates to them how working as a team can benefit them. If we do that and we still go out and we lose and we draw, whatever it might be, let's say they lost, for example, it's going to be very difficult, and you cannot tell athletes don't feel disappointed. That's guaranteed. They're gonna feel disappointed, and that's okay. That's human nature. I don't ever want to suppress emotion. What I don't want to be is to be driven by motivation. I don't want to be led by that disappointment. So I get the athletes to engage in something called reflective practice, which is they would go back and look at the competition or the match or think about it, identify some things that went well, didn't go so well, and what will they do better next time. And then hopefully we'll have a session, obviously, between the games kind of thing, and we talk about, we debrief the game, as it were, and then it's how we reframe the forthcoming game. So is it, we're going to be the comeback specialists and we're going to come back and it's the fight back and we're going to, or is it, okay, we're just not going to, we're going to play not to lose. So it's the, what we call the approach versus avoidance goals. Are you working towards something positive, or are you just trying to avoid something you don't want to happen? Now, the avoidance goals obviously come from a place of fear of failure. I don't want to play as badly as I did the last game. I don't want to lose like the last game. And you keep comparing it to something you're trying to avoid, and working from a place of avoidance triggers a series of mental and cognitive processes that we try to ironically avoid. So it's about how you get the athletes to reframe the loss and the forthcoming opportunity, because every game is a new opportunity. The game that you lost might have been to an easier opponent, and actually the second game might be a more difficult or challenging opponent, but you don't know who's going to show up on the day. You don't know who they're going to bring. And in these pandemic times, you don't know who's going to get COVID, who's going to be, knocked out of the potential squad, all this kinds of stuff, who's going to get injured. You can't predict all these things. So you have to be prepared in a way. And this is why the mental skills leading up to all of these are very, very important, because this is practice stuff. Because if you don't practice it, then this is not going to come automatically. And then you're going to have a group of athletes that are going to sink down into a hole and think, this is the worst thing ever. This is, I feel terrible kind of thing. So it's kind of, it's kind of that.
So now, so we talk about the players for a bit. The coach, right? Now the coach is under a lot of pressure. Sometimes we blame. Sometimes, now it's so difficult, right? Now I will tell you how a fan looks at it. So a fan will look at it and one day he'll be like, you know what? The fans let the coach down. I mean, the players, sorry, let the coach down. Then they'll be like, he could have done better. He could have picked better players. He or she, sorry, could have picked better players. But can you give us I know you can't go into too much detail, but how much pressure is a coach normally, and how amazing is a coach? Because a coach has a lot to deal with them. They have to answer to the players. They have to make sure that they're safe when they're traveling with the parents. They have to make sure they have to answer to the board.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Whoever else are above the board and whatnot. Then of course the fans. Right? And there's a lot of things they have to coordinate. And then there are people under them that they will give instructions to. People mightn't follow the instructions. You have to go on both them. And then that's taking you away from focusing, So just break it down to people who may not have an idea. It's a lot that a coach goes through on a daily basis, minute by minute. It never stops, even when they're home.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, 100% agree. I've had the privilege of working with some amazing coaches who have set an excellent example and tone of, what coaches should look like. But it is a 24/7 job on and off the field. I've been in situations with coaches where we come off the field and that's just part of the day finished. Then they have to go off and, do analysis. They have to rewatch footage from training. They have to plan the training session for the next day. They have to, if there's a competition ahead, they have to look at footage of the opposition, analyze how they play. What are some of their strongest players? How might we, because we as Trinidad and Tobago don't always have, and this is across sports, this is not specific to any one sport, we don't have the opportunity to say, this is how we play and, necessarily do that and have the ability to win a game. We are not a team USA, for example, who has funding and access to everything all the time and train 24/7, and they can just go and play like Team USA and win in sport. We have to sometimes observe how oppositions play and try to counteract that or play in a way that is, you know, how we play with our natural talent, but also strategize in a way that, you know, we can move in that direction. So coaches have to think about all these things, and that's just sport related. Then they have to manage the personalities of the players and the team morale. And of course, I play a large role in helping support coaches do that, but they as well have their coaching objectives, their coaching philosophy, the way they want to speak to the players that they would, you know, put forward to them. They have to interact with all the rest of the technical staff. They may have a staff of 2, they may have just an assistant, or they may have a staff of 12. It's very dependent. You know, and a lot of times it's volunteer staff as well in a lot of the sports, because they don't have a lot of funding available to pay everybody, kind of thing. So then you have to rely on people's timeliness and punctuality, and so all of that non-sporting stuff. And then they have to deal with the board, and they have to ratify team selection, and they have to wait for board approval for funding, or for, you know, sometimes you find out you're going to a competition the day before, 2 days before, whatever. So they have all the administrative stuff as well. And then if it's a junior team, as you said, you have a host of parent relationships that you're trying to manage as well and keep at bay, because very much, as much as you think fans are bad, parents could be worse. And the job and role of a coach is an enormous one. And I don't think that we ever stress that enough. We have a lot of volunteer coaches who give their life to sport and to the athletes. And we praise them sort of close to their retirement, or, you know, sometimes if they pass, and we recognize their sort of, you know, their stewardship and their service. But realistically, coaching at any level, from the very grassroots to the national team level, is an enormous job, and it's a huge undertaking. And actually, the mental well-being of our coaches is something that needs to be considered as well. And, you know, then put everything together in one little package as internal, and then throw the fans and the media and what people think are going on behind the scenes. And you know, Trinidadians love to comment on, they have half a sentence, so they'll comment on that half a sentence and not know the true story, or, you know, and you never know the inner workings behind the team unless you're involved in that environment. And so it can be incredibly challenging. And I mean, most coaches I know don't necessarily acknowledge that external stuff, because if you take it on, that's a whole weight by itself. That's very distracting to the internal stuff. So, but I think, yeah, it's an enormous role that is very underrated. So,
yeah, fully agree. Because I mean, I'm an Arsenal fan, and you know, there's Mikel Arteta. He's a newly appointed, well, recently appointed, I should say, manager, and he has had some, you know, I'm not a fan of him from the start, only because for me, I didn't want someone who has never coached in their life before to coach such a big job. He's here, no problem. But to me, what he's been is man management, because you mentioned it just now, to me has been very poor.
Yeah.
To me, he has not, especially with the younger players, he has not been patient with them. No, I mean, I'm not in the room. I'm not there right now. Of course, there's disobedience issues and whatnot. But my thing is, why not put your arm around the player? Now, you may have to do that 10 and 15 times.
Right.
So at which point, Alexandria, do you tell it, because you might advise, you know, a coach on this, at which point do you say, well, you know what, he's just a bad seed? Or is it not that you should just be patient, especially with younger players? Because not all personalities are going to come to you cheery and willing. Yeah, they're going to be some that, you know, a bit stubborn and whatnot. And of course, you can't just focus on the talent, because, as I said, you want someone that's not going to rot in the team. Right? You don't want someone that's going to stay there, bad apple, just because they're a good player. Keep them there, no problem. They play good, they score the goals. No, if you're not shipping up, ship out. But at which point do you, and when still on your coach and still in the team, hey, be a little more patient with the player. Try to bring them around, because you can't just throw someone out just like that. You have to be. Otherwise, you won't have a team. You won't have children. You won't have, you know, anyone, any kind of person, and you know.
Yeah, you know, it's a funny thing. With developmental sports, there's a lot more room for it, because that's the time we're supposed to nurture the players. That's the time we're supposed to give the players the chances and try to better their lives. Because, you know, a lot of our developmental athletes, not all, but a lot, come from very marginalized backgrounds or challenged backgrounds that, you know, can make things difficult. And you see it, it wouldn't just be in their sporting life, it might be in their schooling life, their teachers. You find a common thread. Now, obviously, this is not the role of the coach to go on that sort of fact-finding mission, determine the behavioral issues. That's very much a psychological role, right? So, but if you have access to sports psychology and that element of mental skills to be taught, I have seen it firsthand. I've had the privilege of engaging in community projects with youth who have never heard about sports psychology before. And within 6 weeks, there was notable behavioral changes. And it's simply because someone was giving them the attention or the time of day. Someone was taking the time to actually, because a lot of the time these behavioral actions come from a place of needing something, whether it's attention, whether it's love, whether it's, and you have to understand who their influences are as well. A lot of these athletes, they may be great talents on the field, and then they might be going back to environments or communities where there are guys on the block trying to lure them into, I've had athletes tell me that, they've been involved in nefarious things in the past and that kind of stuff. And we have to kind of take all these things into account. And Trinidad is probably a very unique place in that sense, because you have a more concentrated volume of athletes coming from situations like that. And so these coaches who become these, especially these young boys, it's their father figures. A lot of them may not necessarily have those strong male figures in their life. And so someone who is willing to take the time, and I've seen it time and again with a lot of our coaches, our male coaches, who have dedicated their lives to these young men, these young women, giving them the opportunity to grow, teaching them, giving them things such as food and clothes and stuff like that. Now, there are obviously blurred lines there, because then there becomes a power dynamic and all that kind of stuff. But this is part of the sporting culture, unfortunately. But this is part of it. And I think, to me, everyone has the ability to change, regardless of age or, some backgrounds you're working against it. But there has to be that inherent want to see yourself in a different space. Yeah. I have seen very, very, very talented athletes just not want to get out of that. They don't want to let go of what they know. They don't want to move away from the easy instant gratification that they're getting from wherever it is. So they give up their opportunity in the realm of sport. And then I've seen athletes who work really hard, have made national teams or on national teams, and have said, no, this is what I want to do. I want to play this sport. And, no matter what, I'm going inside at 6 o'clock. I'm not lining on the block at 6 instead, So, and you have to give them that option. Now, on the national level, it's a little bit different, because if you're playing international sport, that's not the time for development and growth and, trying to get, yes, you give room for change and that kind of stuff. But there's an expectation that you should be at a certain point. But then, which is the chicken or the egg? At the developmental level, if we're not doing it, we can't then expect it at the national level, and vice versa. So we have to start with the foundations first before we get to the expectation of this is what you should be at a national elite level. So
and that's the trick with a team, because it's not just, as you said, not just the mental, but the cultural, and then the background and where they come from, societal, right? It's a lot. And that is why I brought up that example, because to me, you're compounding the issue, because you're just neglecting them. You're just doing it. Instead of, it could be, yes, be disciplinary, no problem, but don't just cast them aside. Don't, what, he's a problem, because I just let him be just someone else's problem.
And I've seen a lot of coaches exhaust the talent of the problem athlete. And it happens at the junior level more so. You exhaust the talent, and they go off and they swim all the competitions, or they play all the hockey or whatever, and they do whatever. And then once that junior to senior transition, they're not necessarily performing because they're not that junior talent anymore. All right, well, we're done with them, and you cast them aside kind of thing. But actually, we shouldn't teach our young athletes that it's about talent and winning, and we have to create at the developmental level that environment of excellence. And it's important for coaches to understand that environment for excellence is also nurturing them as individuals and their behaviors and stuff like that. So it's a tricky little melting pot, but the job of coaching is not easy, and there is no one size fits all, but it's certainly challenging.
No, I agree. I fully. I myself trying to organize my stuff as well because I want to get into coaching eventually. But I respect it. Trust me, that's not something easy at all. Because another thing too, you have to, as you said, it's 15. A squad of 15, or say 11 on the field. You have to instead of not just harnessing their skill, not just doing the mental. You have to work on their temperament because other teams will do their homework. They will know that John Smith. He's had anger issues. He got a red card last 2 games. Let's go. Let's target him, right? Let's work on him.
Yeah.
So do you deal with these? Is it better to deal with them on an individual level, or as you said, do it with team activities to bring them in more, or you do mix it? Because again, these kind of players might be embarrassed. They might feel like, no, I don't need that. I'm not part of it. And two, what's I'll tighten the FPL just now, right? But let's go there first. We will tighten the FPL after. But how? Because you must have that player who has that anger issue, who has that, once someone gets in the head, and sometimes he is a key player to your team, and you can't, and when you go on, that's it, capitulation.
The emotional regulation of athletes is important, and that starts from young, that learning, that emotional regulation. And when I don't get something or something doesn't go my way, how do I deal? And that's compounded by how they're coached as well. At a young age, if you have a coach screaming at you saying, why you do that? That's so stupid. And you, then it's one of two things. They can either go in completely internal and start beating up themselves and have that implosion of self, and then just collapse on the field, not physically, obviously, but performance-wise. Or you can have someone who lashes out because they were taught that aggression and that, go get it, it's perfection kind of thing, and strive for that. And when they make a mistake, they get really angry and frustrated, and you see them throwing their toys out the window kind of thing. So,
or the prom,
that emotional regulation is very, very important. And that's taught from very simple things. I've seen it time and again in training sessions, a player, let's say a young teen, now dealing with teenage boys as well, they're at a prime age of transition biologically, and that hormone also that aggression. So you might have let's say a young budding athlete who's trying to get ready for a competition or something, and something doesn't go his way, and you see him smash a cone, or he might fling up something, or just it's at that moment that you don't go, hey, don't do that, because that just in one ear out the other. But you actually have to either pull them aside after, because I'm not a fan of embarrassing somebody in front of them. Pull them aside and say, hey, we don't like that behavior. What is that about? And kind of have that conversation with them as to why they react like that. And instead, okay, well, next time, why don't you try and react and give them an alternative that's a better solution to the behavior. And, again, it comes back to, this is the difficulty of coaching. You have to look here, there, and everywhere and notice what's going on and who's doing what and what behaviors you like and what behaviors you don't like, and try to foster that culture. And that comes from you. That starts from you. I think it's probably harder for developmental coaches, because at that point, they are genuinely raising the athletes that then move into the elite national level. So I think it's really important. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm not targeting male athletes, only female athletes have their aggressions as well, and so on. And it's certainly a fine balance, because then there's a dynamic of having a male coach buffing a female player as well and stuff like that. So we have to always tread carefully. But the developmental side of things is really, really important. Teaching them emotional regulation, emotional awareness, creating safe spaces for them to feel comfortable to talk to you. I had an athlete who was very gentle on the field, but actually an aggressor outside. And so you're also trying to find that balance. Well, what makes you so aggressive outside, but you're kind of actually very timid and shy on the field kind of thing. So it can certainly be an interesting situation with each athlete that you come across. There's no, but yeah.
So we coming into the FPL aspect soon, right? But what what can fans, what's it? I mean, there are obvious things, obviously, right? But as fans, right? What do we need to no, you broke it down beautifully. The stage, what players go through, what coaches go through. What do we need to remind ourselves? Like, what are some simple, I mean, kindness, compassion, understanding. We need to be understanding. We know, right? Because forget Trinidad, right? I've been to some games abroad, and I know you know, right? English fans, right? I'm targeting your English fans are brutal.
Yeah,
European fans on a whole, don't get me wrong. South American fans, right?
Yeah.
But I know you broke it down a little bit there, but just some simple, like some maybe 4 or so key watchwords that just to keep us in check now. Like, okay, you know, these guys are human. They want to win too. They don't want to lose. They never, you all never set out, you know what, we're going to lose today. No, right? There's always that winning mentality. They want to go there. Just as sometimes, you know, the things change, things happen. The other team might be a little more prepared. That could happen. Terrain, something go against, the referee goes against you, all kind of things. But at the end of the day, how can we be reminded, you know what, let's stick with our boys, stick with our girls, and support the coach, support the team. What's some simple words, simple things that just, some mantras maybe that we could just be like, all right, you know, these guys are human.
I want to keep working as a sports psychologist, so I'm not going to bash any fans, but I'm going to say that it's definitely difficult because fanship comes with emotionality. Every fan is emotionally attached to their team in some respect. Some fans invest a lot, and you see them following the team everywhere and getting the merch and, you know, looking at the documentaries and reading the books and whatever else. And then you have some fans who are just like, yeah, I support so-and-so, and you'll watch, you know, kind of infrequently or whatever. But there is a culture and a community that is fostered when you become a fan of a sports team. And it's really a big deal. And I think it all stems, obviously, from the sort of international bodies that sell these sports. Sports marketers are brilliant because they sell passion. They sell this product of emotion to the fans. So, you know, what we propose in elite sports is always to win. So when that doesn't happen, it's very painful versus, you know, when the team is winning. Whoever won, those fans are always happy. I think if a fan is willing to learn, I would always say that, you know, don't be quick to judge the performance. I think there is so much, especially in a team sport and even in individual sports, you know, you have no idea the 10 seconds before they walked out into that tunnel, what happened. We have no idea how they slept that night. We have no idea what they ate that morning, you know, what arguments took place between players. We have no idea what discussions were had, you know, somebody might have seen something on social media that was disparaging them, and then, you know, they went out onto the field with that comment in their head kind of thing. So I think it's always important for fans not necessarily to be quick to judge. And I think just always try to be supportive, even in the loss, you know, because at the end of the day, nobody really benefits from being bashed. The team is not going to play any better if you thrash them on social media. Nobody is going to change. No change is going to come from somebody being derogatory or negative. And I think this is the problem with social media, is it gives too easy a platform for anybody to say anything. And you know, the good is lost amongst the comments that are not necessarily positive or helpful. So, you know, if you consider yourself a fan, be supportive towards your team. If you're not a fan and just there to disparage, then what value is that bringing to you as a human being? You know, we have to kind of consider these things. Well, why am I commenting on this? What value do I get from commenting on this right now, kind of thing? And yeah, I think just try and stay, you know, positive is generally what I would encourage fanship to do rather than anything else. Don't change your behaviors, don't change your loyalty or whatever, but try to just be more supportive rather than, you know, he had a terrible game or whatever, somebody in the EPL, you know, he's an awful player. I'm done with him in fantasy league after one bad match kind of thing, you know, so we don't be quick to throw it.
Right. I love that. Wow, that's a beautiful segue. I love that. So we segue in one time because I'm not keeping it too long again, right? We segue into that real quickly. So fantasy football, right? That is what Okay, hold on. We have a quick question here. Miguel, what do you say to fans who say these comments or bashments are part of play? Okay.
As in it is
Okay.
part of the part
Part and parcel of being an athlete. You're in the limelight, you're on the stage, so you have to take it. All right. Yeah, what do you say?
I mean, the reality is in this sporting ecosystem, it is, yeah, definitely it's part and parcel because we don't have control over everybody and what they say and what they comment. But my ideal was obviously what I just described. Just try and be more supportive. You know, if you're a Trinidadian or Tobagonian or a Trinbagonian, as many of us like to call ourselves and be proud that we are a twin island republic. If you have a passport and you're a citizen, what are you bashing one of our national teams for? What are you bashing one of our national athletes for? What are you saying? And, you know, we have to hold the media accountable to it as well because they are the quickest ones to say Trinidad and Tobago gets smashed or this athlete fails to. The language that we use is very, very negative. So it encourages that negativity from the fanship as well. It shouldn't be that. It should be, my word, despite adversity, look at what our Trinbagonian athletes are. I remember getting really annoyed during the Olympics because they were just being so disparaging towards everything. And I'm just like, we just came out of a pandemic and these athletes, some of them have not necessarily trained in months or had access to facilities that they would normally, or were able to go back and forth to, let's say, their training facilities abroad and whatever else. And they've gone and represented, they're Olympians. That's their title. Irrespective of whether they come home with a medal or not, they are Olympians. How many people can call themselves Olympians? It's just
not much at all. Yeah.
I think we don't hold the value of what it takes to be an elite athlete in this country very seriously. You know, we don't appreciate the process. All we're looking for is the outcome. Where's the medal? Where's the trophy? Where's the title? So I know you Arsenal fans would certainly know the value of holding forth until the victory comes. So, you know, you guys have to stay loyal, you stay supportive, and you bash your team. Like, what is it? What do you get out of it?
So we have David here. Thanks, David. So sometimes it's the heat of the moment for the fans. Yes.
I agree. Know that. But then, why is the heat of the moment? A comment on social media. Just let it come out your mouth.
And leave it. Don't die. Don't put it on social media. Agree. So, you familiar with FPL? You familiar with fantasy football? So, the typical life of a fantasy player, Alexandria, let's say match day 7 a.m. Saturday. He or she will get up at 5 a.m. depending on the time zone. Will get up at whatever ridiculous hour to prep the team. Now, worse yet now because of COVID, Alex, you have to get up just before deadline day. It does not make sense picking a player way in advance because that player may get COVID, injury. Now, other, bad things are happening now. So that may happen too, right? We don't really want to touch on that. But so you make a play, you make a decision, you go and ask all the partners all around who to pick. It's match day now. You pick your player. You went to your guru. Your guru told you pick this player. Now, the thing is that people, sometimes the guru would have said, well, I advise this player, but it's your team. But all the person is, right, the guru told me, you know what? Put Sanchez in my team, for sure, big, and captain him, whatever. So, when that does not work out, and they play, and now, the thing is, you would have done all the stats checks. You would have said, his heat map was good, his XG was good, his shot percentage was great, he's bound to score, his output will be great on the day. When that does not come to pass, how can I, as a presenter or as a friend, right, convince someone, that it was not a bad decision? Because people, once something goes wrong, people automatically think that it was a bad decision. The outcome was bad, but it does not mean that you took your time, you did your homework, you picked the right player based on all the correct information presented to you. It was not a bad decision. Right? How do I convince someone, because people take this very seriously.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Fantasy League is a full-on sport, and it takes a dedication and a certain kind of commitment to do it. So props to you fantasy leaguers. But I would say two things. First, I would kind of touch on what you just said, which is it's kind of like convincing a team that even after they've lost, there is still something of value out of the performance. It doesn't mean that it was a poor performance just because you lost. You could have had a really great performance and still lose a game.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I know that logic seems flawed. It's like, well, how is that even possible? But you could lose to the USA 5-0, right? Some might call that an absolute smashing. But realistically, if you put everything into context, okay, maybe it was a team that hadn't played in a few years. Maybe it was a team made up of a lot of juniors. Maybe it was a team that, and everybody had a good performance. It was a bigger opponent. It doesn't mean that it was a poor performance. And then that's where reflective practice kind of comes into play.
Right. I like that.
It's the 3-2-1 method. I don't know if this will work for FPL, but we'll try it and you all will give me feedback, right? And maybe I can start gearing sports psychology towards FPL and see how it works. So you're my case study, as it were. So,
I like that.
So 3-2-1. 3 things that I did well, or 3 good practices I made that led towards making a good decision. I agree. I think Fantasy Pavilion is
yes,
a
I do.
sports psychologist.
Right, I told you, right.
Two things that you would do differently the next time. And why I say why I'm giving these specific numbers is because our brain is very negatively programmed, right? It's designed to be negative and go towards the negative. So and it was an evolutionary feature that worked in our favor for survival, but it didn't necessarily progress as quickly as modern life and fantasy league did. So the reason I say 2 is because then we can limit ourselves to the amount of criticism we're able to give or feedback, because it's very easy to be very self-critical. So 3 things that went well, 2 decisions or choices or perhaps practices that maybe I would do better next time. So maybe I didn't look at X, Y, and Z, and instead I focused on this stat. So, maybe I'll balance it out and take a look at both kind of thing. And then 1 kind of lesson that you learned from the game that you would move forward. So maybe it wasn't just that one player. Maybe it was a couple of players or the lineup of the team, or who you had on the bench versus who you had onto the field. Maybe it would be a different dynamic, or you would have gotten different points if X, Y, and Z happened. Now, with that in mind, we have to remember that Fantasy League is an incredibly unique sort of I don't want to insult anybody and say game, but like it's a unique environment.
It's a game, but yes.
No, it's an environment. It's not a game. Right. It's not like a video.
Yes. No, but yes.
And while we like to believe that we make very informed, objective decisions, we have to recognize that the brain has shortcuts. The brain goes from A to B in the shortest means possible. So while it's an amazingly complex, very heavily studied muscle and amazing organ that produces X, Y, and Z, it actually is very lazy. So we have the shortcuts are called our heuristics, right? And basically it is our biases. You have gambler's fallacy, you have your cognitive bias, you have your, what you believe is, okay, so a rare player or scarce player is more likely of value to me than somebody who's super popular, or groupthink. So I'm going to go with what everybody's saying versus what I'm actually thinking because I want to conform to what my partners are telling me. You're more likely to take lots of risks if you're lower down the table to try and catch up than compared to the managers who are up top who take less risk because they want to maintain their status. All these things come into play, and it is incredible. I think I really need to do a case study on this. Because
you're amazing. You are hitting the nail, because I don't think I have to bring. I have some questions, and you are answering all the questions. Let me shout out Understanding Football. Let me shout out FPL Dallas. Let me shout FPL Lens. I think all your questions there, guys, are being answered, because you single-handedly answered all my questions there very well, and you clearly have an understanding of how it works, right? Because one of the questions we had, right, we constantly tell ourselves to focus on the process, but people are often still disappointed in the outcome if it is not favorable to them.
Right.
So what are some specific ways people can focus on the process, and are there exercises or tools to help curb result-based thinking? And I think I love that. Can you give us the name of it again? I will clip it and have it on Twitter, but can you give us the name of it again? The
3-2-1 reflective.
3-2-1. It sounds like a formation in football, obviously.
Yeah.
It's still short of a few players. It's short of a few players, yes. It's short of a few players still, but yes, it is. Right? So, thank you. Now, again, another exercise I would like you to just help us out with, right?
Sure.
what's a cool way to get some strangers to come together? Because now I've met a lot of people through doing this. So I said we only started in August. We have, I don't like to use the word fans yet, but subscribers from all over, right? From Egypt, Mauritius, right? All over. I know it'll be difficult, obviously, from an online perspective, but what's a cool way? We've been having some nice FPL meetups all over the world. What's a cool way if I want to integrate a nice, not just mental health, but a group activity for FPL players down here in Trinidad? What's a cool activity you suggest? Something cool to bring us together, a nice camaraderie or build, take a team building kind of vibe or something interesting, something
in person or online.
Yeah, it could be in person. If you have an online, fine. But if you have an in person, there are a few that we have down here, and what's some way and something that could help, also not necessarily boost morale, because I say some of them are not always in the best mood. Sometimes they, as you rightfully said, they take this a little too seriously, and they're not considering that, okay, it's 38 games. A player didn't score today. What's preventing him from scoring in the next game? Don't just dump him out. He has many games, because I'm very patient. If you look at my team, Alex, you won't get there. The kind of players that I pick, right? Antonio in the comments can tell you that people call me an OBL guy because of the players that I rely on, right? The player and my players come true, right? Because I'm patient.
Right.
But what's a cooler team building? I mean, I have a crew of 5.
Okay.
Right. That I that build the team of Fantasy Pavilion. What's a nice something I could do with them and others?
Like an in-person activity, you could make it really fun. You could do a scavenger hunt and make it all football related. You could do, and this is not a shameless plug, but there is actually a really great facility that plays foot golf. I don't know if you've done it, but it is a golf course in CONVO, I believe it is. It's called RDM Foot Golf.
All right.
And you can go and play golf with football. So you kick off with if we're exactly. And it's a good little team building exercise. You see a lot of emotional regulation come out of there, because you're not always gonna kick it into the tee, kick it off into the goal and whatnot. And there are a lot of mental skills to be had in that kind of experience and activity, or just simply getting together and not necessarily talking shop, because I think some people can get very stressed in those environments, and then
it always happens.
Can start and the peong and whatnot. So Antonio's down. I'm coming to foot golf. If you all are having it, I hope I'm invited.
Right, of course, yes.
So yeah, that's, definitely just getting together and sort of sharing that community, I think, is one of the best ways, without even having that planned activity and stuff. But steering away from the shop talk, I think, is important.
And I guess for people, and for my subscribers, or for people that I would meet on Twitter, I can't meet physically, I guess a simple thing is just reaching out to them and finding out how the day was, how was the week, talking about other things, as you said, not just shop. Absolutely. Because mostly that's what we do mostly. But sometimes I'm always finding myself, hey, don't forget, it's just a game. These guys are human. But I want to find other ways to say that. But yes, I will try and bring other aspects into it without being too, as you said, being too probing.
Yes.
Right? Right, I'm learning. Right, I pay attention to what you said. Right, I'll be too probing. Try it. Yes, simple things. Right. So, Alex, thank you so much. So this was Alexandria Olton, our sport and exercise psychologist, professional, right, of the Fantasy Pavilion, unofficially. Thank you so much for coming through. You are amazing. Guys, I hope you found this very informative. If you have any more questions, put them below. I'll try and send it on WhatsApp. Please follow on MENTALLTY on Instagram. I'll put it below. Any closing remarks? Anything at all you want to say? Any plugs? Plug yourself. Come on. Yeah, this is what it's for, right?
No, thanks very much for having me, Jared. It was really interesting actually to talk about this. I always like finding a new perspective of sports psychology to deal with, and you had me do my homework, which is good. And I'm happy to always be a resource for anybody who might want to reach out. I don't think there's anything such as a dumb question, but you prove me wrong. Feel free to reach out to Jared and follow the MENTALLTY page. Reach out there. I'm happy to always talk sports psych and console those who may be dealing with a loss.
Right. So, and of course, guys, please. So right now it's international break, everyone's favorite time, not. So, of course, please stay tuned. We have a lot of fun content for you. Later tonight, I'm doing AFCON. Of course, you know, AFCON is going on. We are keeping up with that. And of course, I have a very special guest on Wednesday, a legend of the game. I'm not revealing what that is yet. I may feel cute and do it tomorrow. Not too sure, depending on my mood, right? So, of course, I want to thank my guest, Alexandria Olton, once again. Guys, thanks for coming through. Alexandra, this video got a lot of views. Normally, my lives, we wait till after and get views. So you did good. You did really good. Thank you very much. Thanks for all those who's watching. Thanks for Antonio. Thanks, Miguel. Thanks, Dave, for your company. We appreciate the comments. Thanks to all the FPL community members that send their comments. And of course, guys, happy picking as always. All those are playing AFCON still. And I'll see you guys in a few hours. Take care.